I'm here to talk about Mums for Lungs, which is a volunteer group that I joined in 2017. So we are literally a group of mums who campaign on air pollution, and we all came to it as complete amateurs. So I got involved because when I was pregnant with my first child in 2014, I had a breath test done at the midwives, and they told me at that breath test that I had high levels of carbon monoxide in my system. And obviously that was a bit of a shock, because once you've got a child growing inside you, you want to make sure that everything that goes through your body is healthy and safe, because you know that it's feeding straight in through that placenta into the baby. And we talked about it, and the midwife said, well, do you smoke? And I said, no, I've never smoked. My dad smoked, but, I'd never smoked. And we talked about it a lot, and we couldn't figure out what the source was. Could it be the gas boiler? In the end, we agreed it was probably air pollution, which was obviously a bit of a shock. At that point, I was just commuting into London every day from where I lived, cycling, didn't really think about it. I knew there was a lot of traffic, and I knew it annoyed me. I knew it stank, but I never really thought about what that was and what it was doing to my lungs. And obviously, just being pregnant and feeling quite vulnerable at that time, I really just thought, gosh, if I smoked, I would just stop smoking, and that would solve the problem. But how do I stop breathing the air around me? So that's why I got involved personally. So when he was born, I met some other mums, and we were all pushing our babies around Brixton, which at that point had the dubious honour of having the highest levels of non-compliance with the WHO and the London and the UK NO2 limits. And just the more we walked around and the more we pushed our buggies around, the more we understood just how horrible air pollution is and what a problem it was. So so this is basically Jemima is the lady in the middle with the blue tea cosy hat on, chatting to Sadiq Khan. So Jemima was the real founder of Mums for Lungs and the one that kind of brought us all together. And Jane is the one with glasses. Jane is the social media manager. These two still pretty much run it. Some of them are paid. Jemima and Jane are paid for a day or two a week, not full-time salaries, and the rest of us do it voluntarily. So this is all things that we do in our spare time. So really, the first thing we wanted to do was to raise awareness for ourselves at first, because we didn't understand a lot of the science. As you've seen, Carol explained a lot of the limit values and the science of air pollution, which was really baffling if you've never heard about it before. So we tried to make sure that we understood it and then communicated it to other people. And then we also eventually got dragged into the policy space. Once you understand the problems and you understand how dangerous it is, you want to do something about it. So we now run a selection of campaigns. I'll talk about some of them a bit later on. So as I won't dwell on this too much. Carol's just explained particulate matter and NO2, which are the two serious problems. So that's what we mostly campaign on. And this is the impact across London. So 36,000 premature deaths in the UK, 4,000 across London. It's 300,000 across Europe in general. And it's linked to all these health conditions. Obviously, for children, that's most of us in Mums for Lungs are really there to campaign on behalf of our children who have no voice and have no choice about the air that they breathe when they're children. The one that really kind of makes me scared is the stunted lungs. There's been research done that suggests that I think almost all children in London have 5% less lung capacity than if they didn't live in London. This is something that particularly affects children as they're growing up, because their bodies are obviously smaller, so they're ingesting the same amount of pollutants as we are, but they're breathing faster, they're more active, they're often smaller, so they're close to the roadside. They're breathing in the fumes as they run around and play. And obviously, as a parent, you want to do everything you can to protect them from that. There's also an inequality and a social justice aspect of air pollution, which has become much more clear in the last few years, particularly after COVID, when people started to study the age and demographic profile of people who were being admitted to hospital. And there's good data to show that it's often ethnic minority and lower income households, particularly children from those backgrounds, that are being affected by this. That's partly to do with the fact that those communities will tend to live in more built up areas around big main roads and less likely to live in the leafy suburbs. And and they're less or more likely to breathe in the toxic fumes. And often, many of these families don't own cars as well, so they're breathing in other people's pollution. In Lambeth, I think it's something like 64% or maybe even 68% of families in Lambeth don't own a car. So we'll talk about the London ULEZ in a little bit. I'm sure everybody has lots of questions, but we saw a huge reduction of 44% in NO2 levels at the roadside monitors studied in the period after the central London emission zone. So that's where the zone that was originally covered by the congestion charge, the drop in NO2 levels was 44%. So that's really quite staggering. So here are the things that we campaign on. So school streets, I don't know if you mentioned school streets. Basically, it's a system where people who are walking and cycling, families walking and cycling to school with children, their access to the school is prioritised over motor vehicles. So in most cases, this means that the roads are closed to cars during drop-off and pick-up time. So that means usually about an hour's restriction at the beginning of the day and an hour at the end of the day. You can use either temporary bollards, you can use CCTV cameras, but also you can, in some places, not so much in London, but in Manchester, the council expects the parents to stand at the end of the road and close the road off for those hours, which we think is kind of crazy. But school streets are great. There's 600 of them in London. They're really easy to implement. They usually meet, most people agree with them. Most people are hard-pressed to say they don't want children to have a safer journey to school. So they're a really great, positive thing to campaign on. We also campaign on wood burning. This was one that we had a lot of arguments about at the beginning because some of us felt it was a niche issue and that we really wanted to tackle emissions from transport. But as Carol said, over the last few years, it's become blindingly obvious that emissions from particulate matter, emissions from wood burning are rocketing and in some cases cancelling out some of the gains that have been made elsewhere. So we do campaign on wood burning, and that's really just awareness raising because most people don't have any clue about the danger they're breathing in. Something I find a bit baffling because if you stand next to an open fire and the wind blows the smoke in your face, it's not nice, is it? You cough and you choke and you come away with your clothes smelling of fumes. So I don't quite understand why people don't make that connection, but you know, we're here to try and to make those connections. We also campaigned for the ULEZ expansion to the north and south circular roads, and that was in 2021, which is not the one that we just talked about recently, but was the one that happened 2 years ago. We did an air pollution campaign for the London local elections to get candidates for the elections to commit to measures on air pollution. We've done some stuff on the UK Environment Act, and a recent campaign was Ditch Diesel, which was based on the fact that since the ULEZ came in, sales of new diesel cars in London have collapsed, partly because I think we were just discussing with Roger before, people have started to see the signs now and realise that diesel's on the way out. So actually London has forced that to happen much quicker, which is a great thing, and people are making the switch here much more quickly. So we're just trying to go that last mile and get the message that, you know, it won't be long before diesel cars won't be that popular. And idling, of course, everybody likes to talk about idling. So yeah, this is just a quick rundown of what we do on school streets. It's just about making the safe space around schools safe. This is something that I would dearly love outside our school, which is Judith Kerr Primary School, which is on Half Moon Lane in Herne Hill. But we live at the school's on a main road and with a bus route on it, so we probably can't get a school street there, so we have to look at alternative measures. But there are several at schools around us, and I'm very jealous of the parents who can walk their kids quietly to school and just enjoy walking along and chatting and not spend the whole time terrified that their kid's just going to scoot right into the path of a lorry. And, you know, my children do that all the time, and they're busy chatting, they're not paying any attention, and it's really, really stressful. So I'm a big fan of school streets. So yeah, this is what we do on wood burning. Like I said, it's mostly awareness raising. One of the great things we did was a freedom of information campaign to just find out how many fines had been issued for wood burning. Only 19, despite this figure of 18,600 complaints to local authorities in London. So although we all know it's happening and it shouldn't be happening, people are burning fuel in open fires, which is not actually legal. So anyway, this was the 2021 ULEZ expansion campaign. This one was actually, it was a kind of, let's say, a prototype for the 2023 expansion, and we tried a lot of the arguments out at the time, and a lot of the stuff that's been said this time around was said then. But actually, the rolling out to the North and South circulars was fairly effective and didn't cause too many problems. And I was happy about that because I live inside the South Circular. And then I won't talk about that because that's gone now. All that. Idling, this is something we do all the time, and it's an easy, again, we often try to do some campaigns which are quite easy access, so something that gets everybody's nose out of joint. That's kind of why I wrote about Heathrow, because the noise of the planes drives a lot of people mental. People idling their engines, particularly outside school, drives most people crazy. But it's also incredibly difficult to do anything on idling. One of the problems you have is that if an enforcement officer asks somebody to turn their engine off, if they turn it off, there's nothing the enforcement officer can do. It's only if they refuse to turn it off that they can issue them with a fine. So if you imagine the likelihood of an enforcement officer finding somebody idling, asking them to turn the engine off, and them saying no and therefore getting a fine, it's quite low. So, there's a fairly, it's quite easy to just keep idling your engine. Often people think, well, I'm not staying here very long, I'm just charging my phone up, or I'm just checking where I'm going. I'm just keeping warm because I want to leave the engine on. But I walk past so many cars with my children outside the school, and it really is not very nice. So that's basically us. It's not just for parents, it's for grandparents, it's not even for mums, it's also for dads. We just liked the name Mums for Lungs, it sounded good. But yeah, we basically were open to anybody who wants to campaign. We like to just kind of keep it fairly light-hearted, accessible, and not get too bogged down in a lot of the policy dialogues. Something, if we take questions later, I think we might just move on to Roger and then take questions at the end. I think that was how we were going to do it. But we certainly don't ever claim to be the policy experts. We just want to raise awareness of the issues and talk about, our personal experience as parents, and talk on behalf of our children, because our children have no voice in these things. That's what we're in favour of, any measures that will help to reduce air pollution. So thank you very much for your attention.